On a stormy night in Las Vegas, 1973, Elvis Presley stepped onto the stage carrying more than his guitar. He carried the weight of a marriage breaking apart. Fans expected music. Instead, they witnessed a kiss so raw, so unplanned, it froze thousands in silence. Las Vegas Hilton, February 1973. The desert air outside was thick with rain, an unusual storm pressing down on the neon city. Inside, the showroom glowed with golden light. Velvet curtains framed the stage, the smell of cigarette smoke and cologne hanging in the air. 2,000 fans filled every seat, their voices rising in impatient waves. The announcer's voice boomed, "Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis Presley!" The crowd erupted, but the man who stepped out was carrying more than songs. His white jumpsuit shimmered under the spotlights, rhinestones scattering light across the walls. Yet his eyes were not on the cheering crowd. They were locked on the side stage, where a familiar figure waited. Priscilla. Minutes earlier, they had argued backstage. No one knew the words, only the weight. Joe Esposito, his longtime aide, had tried to calm them, but their voices had risen above even the band's tuning. Now, as Elvis adjusted the microphone stand, the memory of that fight pressed against his chest like a stone. The audience could not see the storm inside him. They only saw the king, guitar slung low, sweat already gathering at his temples. They had come for escape, for 2 hours of music that might make them forget their own lives. But the cracks in his voice during the opening notes told another story. Priscilla lingered near the front, her face unreadable. The spotlight occasionally brushed against her, drawing murmurs through the rows of seats. Why was she here after such a fight? The band played on, but the tension in the room was palpable, like electricity before a strike of lightning. Every fan leaned forward, sensing that something was different tonight. Not just another show, not just another routine performance in the Hilton showroom. This night carried a shadow, a weight that even the rhinestones could not disguise. And so, as Elvis sang, the crowd itself became part of the story. Some clapped louder, trying to cover the unease. Others whispered, eyes darting between the man on stage and the woman just beyond the spotlight. Even the ushers stood still, sensing they were about to witness something they might never forget. The mic crackled as Elvis leaned closer, his deep voice echoing through the cavernous hall. He sang the words, but his eyes betrayed him. Every lyric seemed aimed at her, every note heavier than the last. The storm outside rattled the hotel windows, thunder rumbling in the distance. A rare night in Las Vegas, a storm inside and out, and the question whispered silently through the crowd. What would happen if the private war between Elvis and Priscilla spilled onto the stage itself? Backstage, just minutes before the curtain lifted, the Hilton's narrow dressing room felt more like a battlefield than a sanctuary. Elvis paced, his jumpsuit half unzipped, his chest heaving with anger. Priscilla stood near the door, her arms crossed, her voice steady but sharp. Their words collided like broken glass. Joe Esposito, always nearby, shifted uncomfortably. He had seen quarrels before, but not like this. Not with the show about to begin. Charlie Hodge, guitar in hand, strummed softly, pretending not to hear. But no one could ignore the rising heat. Elvis's tone cracked, carrying through the thin walls. "What do you want from me, Scylla?" he snapped. His voice, the same one that filled stadiums, now trembled with frustration. "I want honesty," she fired back. "I want more than this stage version of you." The band outside tuned their instruments, but the tension drowned out every note. Joe glanced at the clock. 2 minutes until showtime. He whispered, "Elvis, the crowd's waiting." The king didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on hers. A battle of silence before another storm of words. For years, fans imagined their love as perfect. Magazines painted them as America's golden couple. But in this tiny room, the myth unraveled. Love turned to hurt, hurt turned to defiance, and nobody beyond these walls could hear it. The door creaked open. A stagehand peeked in, nervous, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Mr. Presley, they're ready." Elvis didn't move. His jaw clenched, his hands tightened into fists, then relaxed. He turned toward the mirror. The man who stared back looked tired, far older than 38. He zipped the jumpsuit, threw on the jeweled cape, and tried to bury the argument under rhinestones. Priscilla's eyes softened for a moment. She stepped closer, her voice low. "You don't have to prove anything tonight." But Elvis shook his head. "Every night I do." Those were the last words before he walked toward the stage. The hallways echoed with his boots, the sound of a soldier marching toward duty. Priscilla followed at a distance, her presence both a comfort and a wound. The band fell silent as he entered the wings. The audience roared, a wave of noise that shook the very floorboards. He stood still for a heartbeat, letting the sound wash over him. But behind the applause, the argument clung to him like smoke. No fan in the audience could guess what had happened just minutes earlier. They saw the king, cape glistening, smile forced but dazzling. They heard the familiar opening chords. They believed they were witnessing another flawless night in Las Vegas. But backstage, the air still vibrated with the words unspoken, with promises broken, with wounds too deep to heal in a single song. What do you do when the world sees perfection, but the truth is crumbling beneath the lights? How long can a man hold two versions of himself, the legend and the lover, before they collide? The band struck the first notes of C.C. Rider. Elvis lifted the mic, his voice powerful, but behind it lived a tremor. Priscilla, half hidden at the edge of the stage, knew it. Joe knew it, and soon 2,000 strangers would feel it too, even if they didn't understand why. The fight was over, but its echo had followed him into the spotlight, and the night had only just begun. The Hilton showroom pulsed with anticipation. The storm outside rattled against the tall glass windows, but inside, the room was alive with neon light and the clinking of cocktail glasses. 2,000 fans leaned forward, ready for the escape only Elvis Presley could give. He launched into Suspicious Minds. The horns blasted, the drums cracked, and his voice filled the hall. But to those who knew him best, something felt off. His movements were slower, his voice sometimes catching, his eyes searching the crowd instead of locking on the spotlight. Near the front rail, Priscilla sat quietly, her posture calm but unyielding. The glow of the stage caught her face, making her impossible to ignore. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some fans nudged each other. Was that really her? Why was she here? Every time Elvis glanced her way, the tension grew thicker. His voice wavered during the line, "We can't go on together." And the audience noticed. A few gasped, others whispered, sensing that this was not just another performance. Security guards exchanged uneasy looks. They had orders to protect the star, but who could they protect him from tonight? His fans or his own heart? One guard shifted closer to the rail, eyeing Priscilla nervously, unsure whether this was rehearsed or dangerous. The band played on, horns soaring, but even they sensed the shift. Glenn D. Hardin's piano faltered for a beat. Charlie Hodge glanced at Joe Esposito in the wings, both men knowing something unseen was pulling at Elvis. The audience, once roaring, grew quieter. Applause slowed, breaths held longer. They leaned forward, not just listening to the music, but watching every flicker of expression on his face. For 2,000 strangers, the concert became something else, an unfolding story they did not yet understand. Midway through the song, Elvis stepped away from the mic stand, moving closer to the edge of the stage. Fans screamed, hands reaching out, but his gaze never left Priscilla. The moment stretched into silence between notes. A pause so sharp you could hear the shuffle of feet, the crack of ice in a glass, even the faint hiss of a tape recorder in the back row. What happens when a private heartbreak plays out under 1,000 eyes? What do you do when music isn't enough to carry the weight? The storm outside cracked loudly, thunder echoing through the hotel's steel beams. Some in the audience flinched, others laughed nervously. Elvis didn't react. His attention remained fixed on the one person who could undo him with a single glance. The lyrics cut deeper with every line. "We can't build our dreams on suspicious minds." His voice cracked on the word dreams. The room went silent, as if even the orchestra pit held its breath. A woman in the balcony clutched her husband's arm, whispering, "Something's wrong tonight." Priscilla didn't move. Her stillness was louder than any scream. She sat framed in light, her face unreadable, her eyes locked with his. Around her, fans began whispering, sensing that they were watching a scene meant for no one but them. And then it happened. Elvis stopped singing for a beat too long. The band stumbled, filling the gap with nervous improvisation. The crowd froze. Thousands of people stared at him, waiting for the next note. But he only stared back at her. Every second stretched like an hour. The audience held its breath. This was no longer a performance. It was a battle between love and pride, playing out in real time. A murmur moved through the hall. Was the king breaking down? Was he about to walk off stage? The tension gripped every row like a hand squeezing tighter. And just as suddenly, Elvis snapped back to the microphone, his voice booming with fresh force. The band scrambled to catch him, horns flaring, drums pounding. The crowd erupted in relief, clapping wildly, as if cheering him back into control. But deep down, they all knew something had shifted. Tonight would not be like the others, and the real shock was still to come. Halfway through the set, the Hilton showroom was trembling with expectation. Elvis had powered through the songs, but everyone sensed the fracture. His voice soared, yet his heart seemed elsewhere. Every glance toward the front rail pulled him closer to something unscripted, something dangerous. The band struck the familiar opening of Love Me Tender. Fans screamed. Couples leaned closer, but Elvis's eyes were not on the ceiling lights or the back rows. They were locked on Priscilla. She sat still, hands folded, her face calm but heavy with history. 1,000 cameras might have captured her image, but none could capture what was passing silently between them. The audience murmured, trying to connect the dots. Why was she here so close on a night like this? Elvis gripped the mic stand tighter. The lyrics rolled off his tongue, but the meaning shifted. Each word seemed like a message, not to the crowd, but to her. "Take me to your heart." The phrase cracked with emotion, more confession than performance. The audience leaned forward, sensing something rare. Security glanced at one another, unsure if they should prepare to intervene. Joe Esposito watched nervously from the wings, knowing Elvis was on the edge of breaking every rule of the stage. And then, it happened. Elvis stepped away from the microphone. The band faltered for a second, horns trailing off awkwardly. He moved to the very edge of the stage, cape brushing against the floor. The crowd erupted into screams, hands reaching out desperately, but he wasn't reaching for them. He reached for her, his hand extended down, fingers brushing Priscilla's. Gasps swept across the showroom, louder than the music itself. She hesitated for a moment, then stood, her eyes never leaving his. In one swift motion, Elvis pulled her closer and kissed her. Time stopped. The band froze. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some screamed, some clapped, others sat in stunned silence. Cameras flashed, capturing fragments of a moment that would become legend. A bootleg tape later revealed the gasp of the audience, a sound sharper than any instrument. Elvis held the kiss, long enough for everyone in the room to know it wasn't staged. This was no publicity stunt. This was raw, messy, and real. When he pulled back, Priscilla's face was unreadable. Half the crowd cheered wildly, the other half sat frozen, unable to process what they had seen. Even the horn section missed their cue, fumbling to catch the rhythm again. 3 words hung unspoken in the air. He kissed her. Every person in that showroom felt they had witnessed something forbidden, something they weren't supposed to see. The king had broken the wall between his legend and his pain, and no one could look away. What drives a man to risk everything in front of thousands? Was it anger? Was it love? Or was it the desperation of someone trying to hold on to a moment slipping away? The storm outside cracked again, thunder rolling above the hotel. The sound seemed to echo the chaos inside. Ushers stood frozen, unsure whether to restore order or simply let history happen. Elvis turned back toward the microphone, his breathing heavy, sweat glistening under the spotlights. He gripped the stand, closed his eyes, and began to sing again. But now every note carried a different weight. It was no longer a concert, it was confession. Priscilla returned to her seat, the crowd watching her every move. She sat down slowly, folding her hands once more, as if nothing had happened. But everyone knew everything had changed. The audience roared with renewed energy. Some screamed with joy, convinced they had just witnessed a reconciliation. Others whispered nervously, wondering if the king had finally lost control. Either way, no one in that room would ever forget it, and as the song carried on, a single question pressed itself into the heart of every witness. What would this kiss mean for Elvis and Priscilla when the lights finally went dark? The Hilton showroom buzzed with chaos. The moment Elvis's lips touched Priscilla's, the crowd became a storm of its own. Women shrieked as if betrayed, others sobbed with joy. Men shook their heads, muttering that the king had gone too far. The sound was deafening. Cheers, gasps, camera flashes, all colliding in the smoky air. Security guards hesitated at the stage rail. Their orders had never included this. How could they guard a man from his own heart? Joe Esposito stayed frozen in the wings, watching history unfold in a way that no rehearsal, no contract, no press clipping could have predicted. Bootleggers in the back row clicked their tape recorders off and on nervously, unsure if they'd even captured the kiss. One fan scribbled furiously in her diary, the page later describing the room as a place where love and disaster shook hands. The band stumbled, trying to regain rhythm. Horns squealed off key. The drummer nearly lost the beat. But Elvis carried on, his voice rising above the confusion, turning pain into sound. The louder he sang, the louder the crowd reacted. Some rose to their feet, clapping and screaming. Others sat in stunned silence, arms crossed tightly, unwilling to celebrate what they didn't understand, and still, the image of that kiss burned into every mind. The Las Vegas Sun would later call it reckless. Critics wrote that Elvis had blurred the line between personal life and performance, breaking the sacred illusion that audiences depended on. Yet for many fans, the kiss was proof that even the king was human. What would you have thought sitting in that crowd? Would you have cheered, or whispered that the legend was falling apart before your eyes? The storm outside grew louder, rain hammering against the hotel glass, as if the desert itself was trying to listen. Inside, emotions crashed like waves, sweeping over everyone in the room. For a brief moment, Elvis smiled faintly, as if daring the world to judge him. Priscilla remained seated, her stillness a riddle no one could solve. Some fans swore they saw her eyes glisten. Others claimed she looked stone cold, untouched by the chaos. As the show continued, tension lingered like smoke. Each song became heavier, each lyric sharper. The audience no longer clapped on rhythm. They reacted to him like witnesses, not spectators. Every gesture, every glance, felt like a secret message sent across the hall. By the end of the set, the crowd was split in two. Those who believed they had seen a miraculous reconciliation, and those convinced they had just watched a marriage unravel in real time. Neither side could prove they were right, but all agreed on one thing. It was a night they would never forget. And as the curtain fell, one haunting question followed them out into the rain-soaked Las Vegas streets. Had the kiss healed the wound, or sealed it forever? The night ended, but the echo of that kiss carried far beyond the Hilton's walls. Fans spilled into the rain-drenched streets of Las Vegas, clutching ticket stubs like relics. Some laughed, retelling the moment as if they had just seen a miracle. Others shook their heads, convinced they had watched the beginning of the end. Within days, newspapers across Nevada ran stories. Headlines in bold letters: Elvis kisses Priscilla on stage, audience stunned. The Las Vegas Review-Journal framed it as scandal, while smaller columns painted it as romance. Critics debated whether Elvis had crossed a line, but fans filled letters with pleas for reconciliation. Stacks of envelopes arrived at Graceland. Scarves, handwritten poems, and even lockets were mailed, each note begging them to stay together. "Don't give up on her," one fan wrote. Another scrawled, That kiss gave me hope for my own marriage. Bootleg tapes of the concert spread quickly. In smoky record shops and fan clubs, scratchy recordings captured the gasps, the silence, and the explosion of cheers. Collectors passed them around like contraband treasure, proof that they had heard history break open in a single breath. At the Hilton, employees whispered about it for weeks. One usher told friends he had never seen an audience freeze like that. A bartender described how he had stopped pouring drinks just to watch. Even decades later, workers still remembered where they stood when the kiss happened. And then came the plaque. Years later, in the Hilton lobby, a brass marker was mounted discreetly near the showroom entrance. It read, February 1973, the night Elvis kissed Priscilla. Fans never forgot. Visitors paused, tracing the letters with their fingers, as though touching a piece of living memory. The kiss became more than a moment. It became a legend. Fan clubs retold it in newsletters. Parents passed it down to their children, and those who were there told the story with trembling voices. To some, it was proof of love's endurance. To others, it was a final farewell dressed as passion. Which version was true? Did the kiss mean reconciliation? Or was it the last desperate attempt of two hearts already broken? Priscilla rarely spoke of it. When asked, she brushed it aside, calling it just a moment. But fans refused to let go. They replayed the tapes, reread the articles, and debated endlessly. The mystery only deepened the power of the story. Elvis himself never explained it. In later shows, he never repeated the act, perhaps because it wasn't meant to be repeated. Perhaps because lightning cannot strike twice. The Hilton night lived on like an open question. For some, it was the night the king proved his love. For others, it was the night he revealed his pain. Either way, its ripples carried forward, changing how fans saw him, not just as a star, but as a man. And decades later, when tourists pass through Las Vegas, some still stop at the old Hilton site. They stand in the quiet lobby, reading the plaque, imagining the roar of a crowd, the thunder of a storm, and a kiss that shook the world. Looking back on that stormy February night, the kiss was not a fairy tale ending. It was something more complicated, more human. For the audience, it seemed like reconciliation. For Elvis and Priscilla, it was a flash of vulnerability, a defiant moment in a life ruled by schedules, contracts, and expectation. The Hilton showroom has seen thousands of shows, but few moments so raw. Elvis, the king of rock and roll, a man who lived under constant glare, had chosen to bare his heart in front of 2,000 strangers. He could have hidden behind the music, but instead he let love, anger, and longing collide in one unforgettable gesture. What do we see when we remember it today? Was it a confession, a plea, or a goodbye? Perhaps all three. Legends are often remembered for their music, but sometimes they are remembered for a single act that reveals their humanity more than any lyric. Priscilla herself rarely spoke of it, and perhaps that silence was her answer. To her, it may have been just a spark in a storm that could not be stopped. Yet to the fans, it became a symbol, proof that even under blinding lights, love can show itself in ways no one expects. Fame magnifies everything: triumphs, failures, moments of tenderness, moments of regret. For Elvis, the kiss proved he was still capable of shocking the world. Not with a song, not with a rhinestone suit, but with something as simple as love. Decades later, people still whisper about it. Fan clubs still debate what it meant. Visitors still find the plaque in the Hilton lobby, standing quietly as though listening for the echoes of that night. They imagine the crowd's gasp, the silence after thunder, and the roar of applause that followed. In the end, maybe the meaning doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is that for one fleeting moment, thousands of people witnessed something real, not staged, not rehearsed, just raw, unfiltered humanity, and that is why it lingers. The moral is simple, yet powerful. Even the brightest legends are fragile, and even the strongest hearts need to be seen. Elvis showed the world that night that love, even fractured love can break through the noise. We remember him for his music, his charisma, his voice that shook the world. But on that February night, in the middle of a storm, we also remember him for a kiss, a moment that reminded us that behind the legend was a man who still longed, still hurt, still loved, and perhaps that is why the story endures. Because in the end, we are all searching for proof that love, even in chaos, can rise for one final unforgettable moment. If you were in that Hilton showroom in 1973, what would you have thought, reckless or romantic? Share this story with someone who still believes in the power of love, even when it's complicated. And if you want more untold Elvis moments, stay with us. The next story may surprise you even more.